about you more often. You're a really good book. Kim here, and I'm going on a trip. Yes, husband and I are traveling very soon into the depths of the wilderness again. Because it's summer and that's what you do. You flee to the mountains to live like a homeless person. Truthfully, I'm a little bit excited about it because I am going to have a lot of time to sit there and read. And if you know anything about me, it is that I enjoy reading. As usual, when I go on a trip, I like to recommend some books based on the theme of that trip, and here I am to recommend some wild, foresty nature books. Because who doesn't love nature? Nature's fine as long as there are no bugs involved. Let's just talk about them. FableHaven by Brandon Mull. This is about two kids that get stuck at their grandparents' house for a few weeks, and it turns out their grandparents run a sanctuary for magical and mythical creatures. And it's awesome. We'll just start with that. FableHaven, the name of the sanctuary, sits in this giant wilderness forest. Like, there's just forest and mountains and all sorts of crazy wildlife sort of places and things. They very often venture into the forest and they are climbing mountains and things, and there's trees everywhere and there's just all sorts of nature and everything's totally surrounding them the whole time. And I really liked that about this book. I liked that it was this really cool setting of not only the fairies and things that you're surrounded by, but also just the kind of natural earth forest niceness that FableHaven occupies. Like, it just, all of these cool creatures live in this really cool, giant, magical forest. And that is what nature really is. Magic. That was convincing. When I think of the forest, I often think of unicorns. The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle is a wonderful book about the last unicorn. Unicorn goes on a journey slash adventure slash quest through the forest and through the wilderness to find the rest of her kind. She just ventures through all sorts of nature and wildlife and things like that. And it's just trees and forests all the time. So when I think of forests and adventure in forests, this is one of the first books that comes to mind, just because unicorn in the forest doing her unicorn thing in the forest. Sometimes nature is wild and savage, and that only makes me think of Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This not only explores the wildness of nature and the jungle, but also the wildness of human nature. That sounded really smart. Full disclosure, I have not actually read this book, but that's okay. I know what it's about. I've heard enough about it and read the back of the book enough to know what goes on in here. Scary jungle boys! It is the, like, sort of scary, raw, savage part of nature that totally exists. If David Attenborough has taught me anything in those fantastic nature documentaries, is that nature is ruthless, merciless, and brutal. And I feel like that's what this book is about. When you gotta survive, which is what nature's all about, you will do what you gotta do. Hopefully, I will not have to utilize any of those practices on our trip. Of course, nature always makes me think of, like, high fantasy, big adventure stories, epic quests through the mountains and forests and wilderness. One of the series that comes to mind for me on the big quest, high epic fantasy adventure is one I don't really talk about that much, but I'm here to talk about it now. The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. This is the first book, Eragon, and that's Saphira the Dragon. Eragon is a dragon rider. He finds a dragon egg, and he's the dragon rider, and he's gotta do adventure, save the world type stuff with that, obviously. This book's really fun. I really like this series. There's a lot of nature, wilderness, mountainous, trekking, exploration, adventuring going on here with dragons. When I think wild nature and crazy adventure forests, I think unicorns and dragons. Apparently, all forests are filled with magical creatures. Maybe I'll stumble upon a dragon while I'm on my trip, but in the meantime I will be thinking of Saphira and the inheritance cycle. I can't help but get in this wild and free mood when I really reflect on nature, and when I think of wildness in people, I very naturally think of Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Been a while since I've read this one too, and so we're gonna do our best to sum up. This takes place on like the wild moors of Scotland. You've got Heathcliff, who's kind of this protagonist slash antihero slash main character dude, who is just a wild child. That's just who he is. He's wild at heart. I feel like Kathy also, the love interest lady person, also a little bit wild at heart in a different way, but she's still like has a wild heart. I feel like that echoes nature a little bit. Nature in itself has a wild heart. It cannot be contained. It cannot be told what to do. It is, and it's gonna do its thing. And I feel like the characters in this book are like that. As much as you want them to do different things, it's not gonna happen. The setting of this book is also very naturey with the wild moors and things like that, that kind of reflects on their characters as well. It goes hand in hand, this wild nature and wild heart kind of feeling. I often think of this book when I think of nature because it is in itself a wild thing that cannot be tamed. The last wild nature book I want to talk to you about is one that is probably going to seem fairly obvious, and it's one that I actually may start rereading while on this trip if I don't have any work to do. It really is the #1 nature and adventure book series for me, and for a lot of people, I'm sure. Like, did you really think I was not going to talk about Lord of the Rings? Did you think I could get through a single book video without saying, hey, Lord of the Rings is amazing? Aren't you precious? Of course, Lord of the Rings is like the most nature, epic, adventure, quest, journey, exploration slash finding yourself slash saving the world book, all wrapped up in a package of brilliance. When I first started thinking about the books I wanted to talk about for this video, the books that make me think of nature and adventure and forests and the like, this was the very first thing that came to mind, and I had a hard time getting away from it. I almost couldn't think of anything else because it was like, it's Lord of the Rings. It is 100% the quest for the ring. That is the feeling I get when I'm in a forest. I am Legolas through the woods, and I have my bow and arrow, and I will defeat the orcs, and we will help Frodo. That is just my mindset when I'm surrounded by trees. It cannot be helped. If you don't know, Lord of the Rings is about a magic evil ring that must be destroyed, and a group of people set out to do so and encounter many trials and tribulations along the way. There are elves, and there are dwarves, and there are hobbits, and there are human people, among many other creatures, and it is wonderful and fantastic, albeit dense and not the easiest thing to read. It is truly magnificent. Did you know you're my best friend? I am going to be taking this book series with me, and I am going to be rereading it, hopefully on the trip, and I am just going to be happy in the forest reading about my favorite forest. That really encompasses all of my hopes and dreams for this upcoming trip. Nothing says magical forest more than this book series. Nothing. Those are my nature, forest, adventure books. I don't know how I'm going to title this video because I think that nature, forest, adventure, quest, journey, wilderness books is just a little too much. Consider subscribing to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. It's a little all over the place, but not terribly unpleasant. I will see you when I'm back from my travels. Thanks for watching!